We've got Chain Leftist here. We've got Adam. We've got a bunch of people in ETH Denver or Denver. There's a ton going on. Adam, what is going on, man?
What's up, dude? Chain, I'm so glad you were able to make it, man, to talk about, well, not only this huge sale obviously happening on Ordinals, but to give you a little props and congratulations for what you got going on and your own art, which is just pumping through the roof. Of course, I got full FOMO, missed it at, I don't know, whatever it was when you launched it. I don't even know. Was it free at Mint? I can't remember. It was super, super inexpensive at Mint. Remind me of that process, what you did.
Hi, everyone. It was, I think, basically, if for the collectors who collected my work previously, it was 10 pieces were airdropped, or 9 pieces actually, sorry, 9 pieces were airdropped, and then the rest were 0.1 ETH when I did it. That was like more than a year ago, but yeah.
Amazing. And obviously you're getting a tremendous amount of traction with this whole idea of ordinals and art fully on chain on Bitcoin, which, you know, obviously you were super early to identifying, you know, why this might be a thing, which seems in hindsight like completely obvious, yet was not obvious at the time, right? I mean, even back in, you know, 21, we were discussing it, but it wasn't. I mean, what were we thinking back then, where we weren't even like, like what? How did we not? How was this not blatantly obvious to us back in 21? What were we missing back then?
I think it wasn't 21; it was 22, but it was early, like mid 22. I think it was. So first time I ever spoke to Casey was mid 2022. And that was more in research for I was doing a research and I was writing an article about the context of the word NFT and how, I mean, even the space on it together as well with you, I think, Adam.
Yep.
So I was like, you know, looking at different context of how the ownership was justified and, you know, how the term NFT came to be. You know, I looked at Namecoin, I looked at Doge Party, Counterparty, all those like different elements. And I was looking at, in this context, I was also looking at the different ways to look at the newness or like the age of an asset, right? So at that point, I think it was, I was speaking to Exi Pinata, you know, the artist who has some work. Yeah. So he said, like, you know, in Miami, I met this guy called Casey Rodermore. Like he was talking about something like, you know, a different way to maybe measure the newness and oldness of something. You know, like you would look at essentially the sats and you know, when they were produced, and maybe you can link things to those sats. You know, he was calling it ordinal theory or something. I was like, what the hell is this? Okay, so I reached out to Casey and then we started talking. He came into Pinnacle's Discord. He came into NFT Archaeology Discord. We have a bunch of, like, at the time, of course, like nobody knew about any of these. But we discussed it, and then and I put it into my article actually in the end, the ordinal theory in 2022, mid 22, and then what, you know, what it was and everything. And then in about November, Casey again reached out. He was researching how the on-chain art happens, you know, in ETH. Basically, he was like looking at the ways to do it on Bitcoin, and you know, he was essentially working on these inscriptions, right? So he was working on linking sats to these within the taproot, like within the witness data. And like we actually have a tweet, like I think you can find it, it's public tweet. He said, like, he tells me, you know, it's like a 40 mega, it's just right after I did the permanent. So I did it in November, I think, and maybe a few days, like, or a week after or something, he told me, so what is, like, how does it work and stuff? Like, he was looking at autoglyphs, for example, like, you know, oh, like autoglyphs is like fully on chain on ETH from 2019. But like the way that it's displayed, like there is this nuance and the instructions, and like we were talking all those like weird details on or different nuances of on-chain art. And but just on one tweet, he says like, oh, like I found this way to do it within the witness data, and it's like you know, $40 per megabyte or something. And my next tweet is like, what the hell? Like, it's insane. It's super cheap because, you know, on ETH is like at 10 way gas, it's like $10 per kilobyte. Like, you know, $10 per kilobyte versus $40 per megabyte. So and it's on Bitcoin and everything. So I was very shocked, because also I did the permanent, and permanent was super expensive. Like I think permanent is like very I optimized a lot that it's an animated SVG, but it's actually like 9 kilobytes or 8 kilobytes or something. It's actually super optimized. But with that 9 kilobytes, it still cost me like $300 or something to put it on Bitcoin. But he tells me about this, like, oh, I can use the witness data. Okay, so it's not part of the main UTXO set, but it's still kind of validated by most of the miners, and it's $40 per megabyte. I was really shocked.
Yeah.
And this is the moment that I should have really explored more, because
Right.
I was super impressed by it. I was super impressed by it, but I actually tried. I tried to set up my Bitcoin core node, and
oh, you're like me, man. You actually
something.
went down the rabbit hole trying to do it, but failed and lost generational wealth.
Yeah, but I couldn't do it, and then I was like, okay, this is just too much. And I was at the time I was doing other stuff as well, like other work, and I was like, okay, what the hell, whatever. Like, and I ignored it. And then 2 months later,
Yeah.
2 months later, the Ordinal craze started, basically. Yeah.
It's so interesting, and yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's and I'll go back. I'll find that tweet thread, which now obviously becomes this like part of Bitcoin Ordinal's lore, right? With his chat with you. But my actual point when I'm saying 21, what I'm talking about then is, we're all in the, historical NFT space. We're seeing this trend emerge, right? We're seeing autoglyphs go crazy. We're seeing that price towards, on-chain NFTs kind of spike. And obviously you were intrigued by it and wanted to explore it from an artist perspective. But I'm almost like, how did we all kind of miss that larger meta that this was going to take? Like, looking back on it, kind of reviewing it, obviously you didn't miss it. You did see it and you decided to dive in. But what were the rest of us missing? Like, how did we just completely fumble that bag and fail to identify that larger meta?
I think on-chain was really not that popular. I mean, it was only popular in the context of art blocks, which was, who was doing it more on generative, code perspective. And in particularly on Bitcoin, generative art wasn't like ever even happened before. So
Yep.
Yeah, like it was really zero generative art. It was mostly the Pepe's like 101s or maybe the editions through Counterparty. So I think like nobody really thought about really doing the on-chain art. Like it wasn't really big deal for Bitcoin, and even on ETH actually it wasn't that big. It was only in the context of art blocks, and that was pretty much it. And of course there are some collections like autoglyphs and K-comps and all those things, but it really wasn't that popular. I think really 2023 was when it started to get quite a lot, like with ordinals and of course on ETH as well. But it's I think it wasn't that big, I think, before.
So what made you go down that road? Was it kind of because of the puny codes thing that kind of got you interested from an artistic perspective, just like that idea of like on-chain art, or what was it that kind of drove you to dive in deeper and go much deeper than virtually everybody?
So I started collecting on-chain art already the moment I started collecting any NFTs. Basically, mid 2021 was when I started collecting on-chain art already. So it was already one of the more appealing sides of it. Maybe one key moment that made it even more interesting for me was realizing this composability part of on-chain art with loot in 2021, and then I started making my own work, and that was like basically if I was gonna do anything, like it was gonna be on-chain, right? So with puny codes, of course, definitely was a big impact as well, because puny codes was on-chain art, and it's the first one as well, so it got really interesting also. So it's kind of all, I guess, all the puzzle pieces aligned, and then I was like, okay, if I'm going to do anything, it has to be, on chain. And what is the method to do it on chain? It was, like you can do some basic, I think, pixel art, but also you can do, these SVGs or HTML style work. So that was the area I started exploring more, and I started doing it on ETH first. So this Art Ponzi collection, and when I did that, the I mean, it's probably not that natural, but for me it was the most natural next step because I was already collecting stuff on Counterparty as well. It made sense to try it out on Counterparty as well. So that was the main, I think, I guess, motivation. It was just for the purpose of really fucking around, really.
Yeah,
like fooling around.
I mean, if we've learned anything, we realize the fucking around is how the entire ecosystem has been built, right? Like literally,
yeah, actually,
it's literally just people fucking around, and it usually doesn't work. And sometimes it works, 3, 5, 10 years later. Like literally, I think I just put a tweet out about this, like how through the past cycles, the thing that's risen, like this past cycle, we had NFTs rise to lead the cycle and lead the hype. But really, NFTs kind of came into fruition in 2017, right? And then if you look back to the ICO boom, which led to 2017, that was kind of like also kind of hinted at previously, all right? And so it's like you get these cycles come through where maybe it has a cycle where it doesn't quite work or kind of works, but then the next cycle is when it really hits. And I think it's really, really interesting. One thing I wanted to, while we have you on stage, and I hear your kids in the background and stuff, so if you have to pop off, anytime, it's fine, man. But one thing I'd like to pick your brain on is what you like, because there are varying levels of on-chain, right? If you can give people kind of a primer into what it means to you to be on chain and what it is and the different levels, can you kind of dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So it's a couple of dimensions. I also want to look at it in different dimensions, right? So sometimes it's not overlapping even. So there is obviously the chain itself, there is the data format, and there is the, I guess, proper on-chainness, I guess is what we call. So like, I mean, I think in the NFT space, a lot of people don't even, use the term sometimes the way that people who first made the on-chain art are using. And I don't want to, gatekeep any term or anything. So it depends on how people want to, view the terms. But the naturally understood on-chain would mean that the data, it's in such a way on the chain that it's extractable from the chain. So you can reconstruct the art from the chain. So, in historically speaking, you can find, art like links that are on the chain that point to an image, right? So that can be sort of like a way to establish a connection between the token and the visual. Or historically, again, some, people experimented putting the hash of the image. So what that means is that there is a way, like in general, like in encoding or in any sort of really like computer programming or encoding, you can hash things in a way that it creates a one-way hash of an image. So, for example, if you hash an image, it will create you a small string, which will be a proof almost that this image is the one that you're essentially pointing towards in that token.
Right.
So people who put the hash on the chain would essentially be able to prove that if someone says like, okay, this is hash, but I don't know what that is, right, you can say that, hey, this is the image this hash is referring to, and then this other person can go and
check it,
put that image into the hash algorithm, and it would present the same output of strings essentially, and that will be the proof.
And so what, for people who don't understand, like, but that requires you to have the image, right? So that's kind of the thing that the hash, like we've experienced this, that people made these hashes, did the hashes, but then the image, like the person who did it disappeared, or the image went down from the website and stuff. So then people have to like somehow find this image again, right?
So this is not considered, typically this is not considered on chain. This is considered hash on chain, which would mean it's a one-way proof of an image, but it's not, like you said, it's not two-way. So you can't construct the art from the chain.
Yep.
Sorry, my son just jumped into
That's okay. That's okay. The big one that came up recently was the link, right? Because and obviously we've dealt with this a lot in the historical NFT community, but the Nakamoto card, your tweet about that got got quite a lot of traction last week, right? Where you said, hey, the link, on Counterparty for the Rare Pepe Nakamoto card is broken, and it's been broken, I think, for a couple of years now. But it turned out, and I knew this before, like originally the Nakamoto card, when it was originally put on to Counterparty, had no link. It had nothing, right? There was no link. The link was put in later. And a lot of people in the NFT and crypto space do not know that about Rare Pepes. Almost no Rare Pepe, maybe no Rare Pepes at their initial launch had like links included. But talk about that a little bit and the kind of feedback or hate you got online for that. Tell us a little bit about that post.
I mean, I just posted like what it is, right? I mean, it wasn't like a knock on Pepe's really. It's just that it's I think worth knowing. Like basically, I think 99.9% of NFTs either are like you have something within the chain, right? You have at least like either a link to an image, or you have the art itself on the chain, or you have a hash or something, and that applies to actually even real life certificates and deeds to art. Like when you have a kind of a reference point to the art, sometimes you have the codes and barcodes and QR codes, or you have essentially there tends to be a link usually between the deed or the thing that you buy and sell and the visual that you use and buying and selling. However, that's not the case for Rare Purpose. The idea behind Rare Purpose was that it's like there's this social consensus that we believe that this visual represents this token. And when you're buying, essentially you're buying this token, essentially. You're not buying the image, or you're not buying a link, you're buying actually a token which is represented by this visual. But then the issue is that basically where does that visual live? It lives on directory, like the like the Rare Pepper directory.
Yep.
And it's maintained by the Rare Pepper scientists.
Or as Joe would say, you could download it yourself. You should have it yourself, right? Yeah, it's like
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's the kind of a social consensus essentially was what managed or what maintained Rare Pepper's image and token link, but it wasn't within the chain essentially.
Yep.
And that's the case for most of the Pepes. It's not the case for all Pepes though. And it definitely wasn't the case at some point for Nakamoto card, but it is now the case as well for Nakamoto card. But for example, Mike himself like acknowledged that he might actually link to the ordinal of Nakamoto card because he clearly also considers it a better approach. So
yeah,
I just think that like if everything is like that, and if it's if I'm not just within NFT space, I'm talking about even in the outside NFT space, there tends to be a link between these visuals and everything. And why would we leave things to more trust than less trust? Like obviously link is not the 100% best solution either. Like there are lots of, even on chain art is not always the 100% the best solution.
Yeah, exactly. Chains break and go down and die, right?
Yeah, I think like there is like and not even just that, there are like other things as well, but like there are layers to everything. And I feel like, not having is worse than having something.
Sure.
So that's just my point of view.
Yeah, it's like I think in a lot of ways, and this has kind of been my viewpoint for a couple of years now, it's like we're just growing into better and better systems. And we're learning and getting better from, token is the art, as they would say, but we all know it's like, well, it's not exactly the art. The art is still the image itself too. And right. But so it's like the social layer that connects them to, then we went to like sort of a link layer, which is fraught with its own issues. And then now we're moving into kind of an on-chain layer, which I'm sure will have its own issues as well. Nothing, if this tells me anything, almost nothing is perfect, right? And so maybe we move to something else in the future, which may be a combination of maybe all three of those things. I'm not sure. Chris, go ahead, man.
Oh man, Shane, awesome to have you up here. Huge fan. Love seeing you on the timeline and just getting a bunch of recognition for really pioneering the space. It's been a blast kind of seeing the resurgence a few weeks ago of peppermints, and just kind of like came about, was under an ETH, kind of rocketed up to maybe 10K-ish, kind of mellowed out a bit, and then kind of hit the second wave. So excited to see what happens there. Assuming that the centerpiece of this this art was kind of permanent, how did you come to the creative process of the actual art on chain? What was that process like?
So that's also a funny story because I wanted to do it, and I already had my free wallet. I had my I know the counterparty counter wallet or something. So I had access to these tools, and the first thing I did was I actually on Telegram I reached out to Exchange, like JDog.
Mm-hmm.
And a few others. And I asked, like, hey, can I put something else there? Like, do I have to put a link there? Like, can I just put a actual data URI, which is like, what is the universal format for, all browser accepted essentially. Like, that's how they display images and everything. Like, can I just put a data URI there? Like, to that would display the image. And like, they were really against it.
Oh, really?
That's
interesting. Why? What?
No,
JDog
not
didn't want you spamming the chain, or what? What was the reason why?
I mean, I don't know the reason. Maybe they considered it malicious. I don't know what it was, but maybe like you said, maybe it was spamming or maybe something else. That there was this whole XCP drama a few weeks ago as well, so maybe related to that as well. I don't know, but he was very much against it. He says like, no, this is not the purpose for this field. It's you either put a a link there or archive there, and that's it. Or if you want, you can put a description, but that's a description field. Obviously, it's called description for a reason and stuff. And I was like, oh, okay. I was just curious. Maybe I can experiment. So, but even then, I was like, okay, whatever. I'll try something else myself. So what I did, I tried the limit of, because I noticed that there was a limitation on free wallet, I think. So it wasn't possible to do on free wallet. But I went to Counter Wallet and I used one of those servers. I don't remember which one, but I.
So free wallet had like a limit of what, like 80 characters or something like that, and then
I think so. Yeah, okay. I think something. I don't remember exactly. But then this other, like the browser option, I first tried like a pink image, like pink pixel or something. Basically, I tokenized that essentially. I created first, I encoded it or something, and then I made the data URI out of it, and then I put that one, and it worked. And I was like, okay, so if this works, maybe this other thing will also work. So I built the permanent art itself, like the the SVG art, the glitch one. So I built it and I designed it in the exact dimensions that fake rares require, because I wanted to launch it also as part of the fake rares. At the time, like really great artists were launching stuff with fake rares as well. Like they still do. But like I think there was Half to Cut It something, and then, yeah, several people really did good stuff, and I was really inspired by it. So I was okay, like let's do something like interesting there as well. So I put that one in those dimensions, and I then basically put it into the UTF format. I made a data URI out of it, and then I tested it, and I'm seeing, okay, the number $300, is this worth for the experiment? I was like, whatever, like I'll try it, and I did it, and it works. So I was like, okay, so it worked, and then I applied fake rares, and in a few months, I think basically that's why it was launched a bit later, even though it was on chain in November 2022. We did the actual auction, like actual sales, in January, early or mid-January or something in 2023, because fake rare had this like approval process. But yeah, they were like nice and they accepted it, and that's how it came to be.
It's awesome, man. It's so funny when you put out that tweet last week about Rare Pepe and the broken link, and when you started looking through all the stuff, not only on Rare Pepe but just Counterparty, and you see what people were using for links, and you see a lot of, what's that meme site? I can't even remember, but a lot of people use all these, like, to just see the evolution of what people are using, and to see that, okay, now it's IPFS or it's Airweave or whatever, and just see this growth. But I liked how you put out a tweet where you said, okay, what's the most expensive one that has been lost, right? And I thought back to, there was a project that I found in 2018 called Kim Jong Crypto or whatever, right after the Kim Jong Il from North Korea or whatever. And I found this project in 2018, and the images were still there because the website was still up. And I think I claimed only one or two of those, and then talked about it on Twitter and let other people go and claim more. But eventually, whoever had that server, you know, stopped paying for the server, and those images are, you know, they're lost, they're gone, right? They're to the wind. They're not even in. They're not even connected on the contract level, right? And so there are all these kind of old projects. I don't think most people understand a lot of old projects, and probably a whole lot of 2021 NFT projects where those founders are gone and those images are gone, right? And it's an interesting thing with NFTs. And I mean, people have been talking about it since the early days, right? We have Art started a whole company around, you know, just preserving the images of NFTs, right? But where do you think this kind of goes? What do you think is next? And how do you think kind of the NFT and crypto art space moves forward with like image storage? And I mean, like, what do you feel taking where we are now, which is like ordinals on chain, storing stuff as ordinals or stamps or whatever? Where do you think it's going? Where do you think we are in a couple of years from now?
Well, I don't know in that like storage wise if there will be. I mean, there is all this like conversation about data availability layers and stuff, right? Like the all rollups based on data availability, and so this conversation is happening, I think, a lot more on Ethereum side. But that is an angle definitely to consider. I don't know if there can be like really unique inventions that can happen in that space, any like specifically on storage terms. But I think the other sides of the on-chain art can be appealing to people. Like for me personally, for example, it like the more recently, not when I say recently, it's like more than a year now, but still, like the more recently, this on-chain dynamism has become really appealing to me personally, because it's kind of, I feel it's really touches a lot of aspects of the crypto as well, because it's, you know, it's a very dynamic environment, obviously, but there's this social coordination at play a lot in crypto. There is this like ownership aesthetics, like the people, you know, how your, for example, information you have on chain can affect the art. So those things are a lot like starting to become very appealing for me personally. Like some people are calling it runtime art or these kinds of different ways to call it. So this side is becoming very appealing to me, although I don't know if the audience here will be very interested.
Wait, tell me what that, I don't know. This might be the first time I've heard it. What'd you say? Call it runtime art?
Yeah. So, I mean, there are different ways to define it, and I don't even know if my definition is the correct one or someone else's definition is the correct one. But a lot of people this is really more on the Ethereum side, because they're using the blockchain's computation, essentially blockchain's runtime, like running of the blockchain. That's what they mean by it, as a way to, I guess, produce art. And that could be, of course, one aspect of that is the generative elements itself, right?
Gotcha.
So you can use the randomization and so on. But the larger element that is, I think, maybe conceptually a little bit more interesting is using the elements within the chain that can happen, right? So the earliest examples of that were using the block time or block, block number or stuff like that, like the timestamps of the block. So you can, you've seen examples, maybe like things like art that tracks the moon cycle or art that tracks the.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking more of like Crypto Arte, the way he used block size and different.
Yeah, so that's
that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a great example. It's off chain, of course, but when it's done within the chain, it becomes a little more, I guess, like you can actually make it dynamic, right? So you can actually specifically refer to this in this specific block, right? So if something suddenly shoots up in that block, the art suddenly changes, right? So so there is that element, but start like this is what I'm talking about is like the earlier example, but then you can start to see where it can go, right? So now we've seen examples of art that changes based on the price of a token, and then you start seeing art that changes based on the collector's behavior or based on their, I'm talking about again on ETH, but based on their ETH balance, for example, or based on the other NFTs that they own, or based on what they perform on the chain, or based on maybe you can look at some DAO's actions and based on that you can track the art, or you can even do it based on it can be the direct interaction with the chain as well. So it can be like, you're a collector and there is an artist built something, but the collector can perhaps upload something on the chain that becomes a combination of what the artist did and the collector did. So there is this kind of a joint element as well. So the way I see it, in my opinion, like the on-chain art, I think it always will have an appeal. It will always be itself a movement. But like if you ask me like where it can go next, or what is the like next thing that can happen within the context of on-chain art, I guess for me it would really be these elements, like things that use on-chainness not just as a way of storage, but also as a way to build mechanism and concepts around it. That's how I see it, at least.
Right. So to modify artworks based on-chain mechanisms. So as the chain changes or moves or whatever, the artwork actually updates itself. It's interesting. Who was I talking to? Who just did that with, what do you do with stamps? Or maybe it was an ordinal. Where, yeah, depending on the time of day or whatever, on-chain it would modify the ordinal itself. God knows how he did it. Derp, that's who it was. Derp. I don't know if you know Derp.
LNR as well.
Yeah. So obviously, a lot of dev in there, more than even art, but it's that combination of being able to figure it out from the dev side. He actually also did something interesting. I don't know if you saw him do this, where he was using prompts for AI, for an LLM.
Yeah, I saw that.
You saw that, right? Where it's really, I was like, wow. I mean, obviously now it's nothing, but when you start thinking about how AI is going to be integrated in things, and if artists can kind of embed, whatever their vibe on something through a prompt, where whatever AI the person is viewing their AI through, and it modifies based on the artist, could be some really interesting stuff too. But man, we've held you up long enough. If you need to run, totally awesome.
I'm gonna run in a second. I just wanted to say one last thing, because Chris mentioned that, you built this kind of thing. I'm not that early or anything. I mean, yes, Peppermint was, compared to Ordinals, it was early. But just to be clear, there is before Peppermint, like in I think 2022 May or something. So yeah, I did this Peppermint and SVG and put the data URI and stuff on chain and everything. But before that, I actually don't know exact date. I'm sorry for it, but someone like CC Satoshi, so Cornelio, which is in the audience actually today, he did this CC Satoshi, which is the kind of this pixel art on his PFP. So that's also within the done within the multi-sig outpost, a similar method as the Peppermint, essentially. Just minor differences in our methods, essentially. So just to be able to make people aware of it.
Yeah, man. I'm still waiting for Cornholio to pass me one of those bad boys. Yeah, it's awesome, man. I always appreciate the way you are transparent and very logical and stuff in the way you post and lay out your arguments. I thought it was completely unfair how people were brutalizing you last week. That was, people calling you a scammer is ridiculous. So sorry you had to go through all that sort of stuff. Hope you didn't take it too personal. It's just Twitter, but keep up the good work, man. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Sorry, Dogfather, did you have a question to me before I left?
Oh, Dogfather, yeah, man, go.
No question. Hey guys, hey Chain Left. So I'm a big fan, you know that. So we have been in the early Puny days, Puny Codes days, and I think this was very inspiring for everything we did afterwards, because then what happened on Namecoin, that the Punies were there putting stuff on chain. We had base64 encoded artwork on Namecoin. So and then you look at the world differently than if you don't know about these things. And you try it out on, more vivid chains like on Bitcoin. I did something on Dogecoin, very similar, a bit, not as elaborate in terms of the artwork, but, just experimental wise. And I think this brings us forward a lot. And we need to have these discussions. And of course, some people have back bias. We know that. They don't want to hear the truth and they have a different opinion. But I mean, in 1,000 years, on-chain matters. I mean, because everyone who is alive won't be there. may not know about these websites and even archives and social consensus. People will dig out the node, will run it again, spin it up, and look what is in the transactions. And they will find the on-chain art, while they may not find a book about, frogs or, whatever kind of archives of websites, or know whether they are true or not. So I think this is really important, and this is also one of the reasons why Ordinal's inscriptions are popping, because it's very logical for the collectors that this is a big thing. It's on the mother chain. So and of course Casey is an awesome dude, and he was promoting that like few people in the world can do. And this is why Ordinals are so large. And now people know about on-chain art on Bitcoin and everything that was before, also what JP Jensen was doing, Cornelia, you were doing. It's just getting way more attention than a year before or 2 years before.
Yeah, 100%. So sorry, I want to say bye to everyone and thank you for inviting me. I couldn't say hi to Devoted either, but love to you all. See ya. Bye.
Thanks, man. Thanks for coming. Devoted, man. I haven't talked to you in a while, bro. Where you been, bro?
Hi, sir. So it's been a while indeed, and nothing, just like hanging around in the crypto Twitter space. And I was a bit focused on the business as well. The Degen side had taken over a bit too much of my time, and then like I had to let go of a few of the individuals within my organization. So decided to take a couple of months, focus more on that side, and then now it's better than ever. So yeah, all good.
Well, welcome back, bro. It's fun to be back for the beginning of the bull run, and you see all this on-chain stuff, popping. Obviously, I don't know how much of the Ordinals explosion you were tracking, but every time I see it, and obviously when Ordinals, we were there at the beginning when it started going off, and but immediately I start thinking about puny codes every time, right? And if just for people in the audience who don't know about puny codes and the rediscovery, it'd be cool if you give the 1 minute overview of kind of how that went down, just so people understand what it is. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, sure thing. And so to the people who don't know, so Namecoin is one of the first, like it's arguably the first altcoin that was created back in 2011, and the initial like ideas were discussed by Satoshi himself on the Bitcoin Talk forum. And after that, in April 2021, so the birth to the Namecoin blockchain was given. It was basically it's kind of, you could say, the preliminary version to ENS that we see today. And the censorship resistant domains was the basic idea behind it, so that like just like your Bitcoin cannot be taken by someone unless obviously they have the seed to it, in a similar fashion a domain can't be taken down by a centralized organization, by let's say the government. And so as soon as about 20 days after the creation of the chain, the first chain, Namecoin, so people, including some of the core developers of the Namecoin blockchain at that time, started experimenting with the namespace to create different kinds of, some people would say artwork, some people would say just artistic experiments onto the chain. And thus, so some of the earliest, with the birth to some of the earliest puny codes were given. So puny code is basically an encoding language via which you can inscribe various forms of emojis, ASCII artworks, etc. onto a domain space. And the first puny code was on 10th May 2011, and those were, you could say, one of the first experiments in the artistic space in the crypto realm. And I guess in 2022 January was the day that me and Pudl, he has left the space as of right now for the last about year or two, but initially we both were just Namecoin enthusiasts. We were hanging around the chain, finding different kinds of experiments that were there, and just playing around with the entire ecosystem in general. And then we had found some of the earliest, so how the Punicode encoding language works, it's accent dash dash and some various forms of characters, including alphanumeric characters. And via that, you can encode an emoji or artwork, like you can see my PFP, it's basically the ASCII artwork of an owl. So this was encoded back in 2012. So these were the earliest, you could say, artistic experiments. And then we had basically discovered these and then wrote out a tweet. It's my pinned tweet in my profile. And then since like within a couple of, I would say within a day or two of the discovery, the flow rose to upwards of 2 weeks. And it was like extremely like unbelievable to me, because these were basically free mints, you could say. And I had sent people out Namecoin so that they could go open up the Namecoin wallet, play around with the assets, etc. So yeah, that was the rediscovery process of one of the first artworks, you could say, or artist assets that represented artistic experiments of our space.
Yeah, the and so people who don't know, one of the, and it's kind of harkens back to what I was talking about earlier, the growth of everything in crypto, where we learn on what was maybe mistakes or just, you know, experiments, like with Namecoin has what we would now consider a flaw for most things, which is they all expire right after 6-8 months, which we still see with like ENS names, right? Those still expire. But obviously, but this is a huge issue when it comes to, you know, holding assets on chain. We now take it as, you know, if I have an asset, it's mine indefinitely, nothing can happen to it, nobody can take it from me, right? So it's like this kind of like, that's our understanding. But on Namecoin, you know, those guys who were doing Namecoin at the time, in order to prevent, you know, think of it as ENS, in order to prevent squatting, in order to encourage use and make sure people maintain them, right? They expire. And so, you know, these are some of the early lessons of like things that actually, that's not what people prefer. And so, yeah, it's interesting to see, you know, Namecoin, how it was so early from a domain perspective, even from an identity perspective. And I pinned my tweet that I put out earlier today on this idea of identity, and how, yeah, we had some traction with ENS names and identity kind of last cycle. But it almost feels like we're coming into maybe a more full realization of that identity. And I don't know. But Punicos for me are always this kind of like really, really cool, very, very early art on blockchain, and period. That's it. Right. We'll argue for the next 100 years about the you know, whether they are real, if they expire, is it the real one, is it the fake one, you know, all this sort of stuff. And actually Chain Left has some amazing posts on that, and deep threads on like that debate, because it's a vigorous debate. But from a collectability standpoint, meaning, you know, are these very important in the history of blockchains? I mean, I just, how could you even argue against it? We could argue if it's the initial token or not, but there's no question that they're important. Go ahead, Devoted. I see you unmuted your mic.
Yeah, like I absolutely agree. And like Punicodes itself was the first time Chain Left himself had entered the space. And after that, within, I could say, a period of a few months, he was really like fascinated by all the experiments that were going on. And then he started playing around with creating his own first artworks. And I'm proud to say I was one of the, like, I believe Adam and myself, he has left the chat as of right now, but a different Adam, not the Adam that's like, I'm speaking to you. But yeah, Adam. So we were one of the first collectors of his artworks. And then when after about then a couple of months later, he had shared the, like initially, even I guess even before putting the artwork on chain, he had shared the artwork of Peppermint with us. And like I was literally in awe of it. And I was like, man, this is one of your finest works as of right now. And then after some time, and he like it told me that how this can be a novel experiment onto the Bitcoin chain, that how he's basically storing the image on chain. However, like to the people who don't know, so there was a saying back in 2021 that if you see any projects claiming themselves to be a first in the NFT space, then you should just look back at how Rare Pepe had done it between 2016 and 18. And then most probably the chances are that if there's any work that any project that's claiming to be a first, Rare Pepe have done it already.
Yeah.
So that particular saying was going in my mind as well. And I was like I don't think like the entire under the entire period the XCP was live ever since 2014, and the Bitcoin itself as a chain ever since like 2009, of course. So someone wouldn't had like put in a particular artwork on chain. But yeah, it seems like Cornelio and Chain Left were one of the first artists to experiment this kind of on-chainness when it comes to artworks on the Bitcoin blockchain.
Yeah, it's one of the interesting things, like with puny codes too. Well, puny codes kind of highlighted that what's put on chain, and this is something that I get from people who don't know what's happening or don't kind of understand what on chain necessarily means. Is they'll think whatever, if I put a picture of an ape onto an ordinal, they somehow think I'm actually putting the image of the ape somehow magically in the chain. They don't understand that it's just a string of, you know, numbers and text. It's a hash. It's this or that. They literally don't get it. And so trying to describe, you know, well, puny codes, right? You know, that it's a computer basically reads it and creates the image. A lot of people don't understand the different ways that can be put on chain, right? How do you look at that? And just from a perspective of long term, how would you feel like if I put it in a certain mechanism? Like, for example, I'm rambling a bit here, but let me get to something. Like, for example, Flash, right? Flash was huge in the early 2000s, right? Now Flash is almost not even used, right? So if I put something on chain that used Flash as like the interpreter of what was on chain, I'd be in trouble now because a lot of stuff wouldn't be able to see it or kind of show it, right? How would you look at that from what we're currently putting on chain, right? Which, of course, we have ways of interpreting all the stuff we put on now. But in the future, like Dogfather just said, okay, 100 years from now, what if they don't know how to interpret an SVG file, right? How do you look at that with kind of taking a long-term view?
Yeah, I completely agree. So like some of the first, you could say, like obviously the breakthrough that Bitcoin had was like breaking the Byzantine generals problem. But like apart from that, like on-chain storage, like having something that it's truly immutable and something that can't be taken down by a centralized authority is one of the most, you could say, one of the most powerful use cases of Bitcoin and the entire crypto space in general. And obviously, like as like time has passes, like you can't just look back at something that was, let's say, created in 2016 or 15 or whatever time that was created on and say, man, this is not on chain, because, well, to be honest, no one had the insight at that point to like think that, okay, I need to create an asset in such a way that it's going to be immutably stored onto the chain for the next 1,000 years or 10,000 years or so. However, yes, like actually storing the assets that are completely on chain, that can be rendered by the coming generations, no matter how many decades or centuries down the timeline we go. So that is one of the most powerful things. And you could say, like, obviously, like how on chain an artwork is, that is like, you could debate that on it's going to be a really long debate for the same. However, you could say Autoglyphs was one of the first to do it completely on chain, because the algo is stored on chain and you can use the algo to render the artworks. And but however, when it comes to just being truly on chain, like asset, like initially, like you could say, obviously the names created back in 2011 on Namecoin, they were, you could say, let's say for example bitcoin.bit, that was the first domain created. So that is something that is truly on chain. So it's just like the Bitcoin, it's just BITCOIN. So those are just the alphabets. And a similar fashion when it comes to putting the puny codes on chain, so that was like you have the encoding language itself there, and then you can render that and create the artwork like my owl ASCII over here. So those are one of the first earliest experiments of on-chain. And it, like Namecoin would argue, you guys could say that Namecoin was almost a dead chain until the rediscovery processes that were going on in 2021. And up till that point, for the many years, like all the assets that were stored over there that have a, you could say, a completely on-chain directory, like they could easily be rendered by anyone, including myself and like all the people who were there while the rediscovery processes around 2021. So in a similar, like, and there are some assets on the Namecoin chain which had a link in it, but many of the links expired and we don't really know what exactly was stored on those particular assets. So yeah, on chain, like it's one of the most important things moving forward. And this is the reason why I'm not really sure if DevBeef did it or Larva Labs did it, but they put CryptoPunks on chain as well. In I guess 2021 or something. Yeah.
Yeah. What were you saying about DevBeef? What did he do? Did he do something
I'm
recently?
not really sure if Larva Labs had like added the punks on chain or DevBeef had. I'm not exactly sure on that.
No,
So
I think the punks did it. Yeah, they did it.
Okay.
They did it. Larva Labs did it themselves, I believe. Go ahead, Dogfather.
Yeah, just one thing to add. I mean, that's also why Bitcoin ordinals are so popular, because you can put whole packages on chain and everyone can recursively use them. So you never have the problem that actually the underlying interpreter or package is not available anymore. So you don't have to link to any server. You just link to a Bitcoin inscription that includes the code. I think this is something like a growing computer on Bitcoin. This makes it extremely powerful, and I haven't seen this actually somewhere else. But I'm also not like an on-chain dev, but this looks like super powerful. Once people really spend the money putting the code on chain, everyone can use it.
Yeah, I think that's it's a really good point. It's something that I mean, obviously Punicode's, even for people who might not realize it, but the Punicode interpreter is like, I think almost every computer on earth has a Punicode interpreter, right? But it is different, like the SVG interpreter, how you interpret the images, almost always requires an off-chain mechanism. Some of them are widely available now, but to Dogfather's point, this ability to not even need it because it's kind of encoded in the blockchain itself. I don't know. It just feels right. It just feels like that's going to be the way forward, at least for the time being. Who knows where it's going to be a decade from now, but that feels like, for now, that feels like the right way forward. But Chris, do you have any final words here to bring us home, man?
Oh man, yeah, just kind of let's wrap it up with just kind of the title. And Adam, what do you think, man? Each obviously have their own kind of value proposition and really lead into, provenance and so many important milestones within the industry.
Yep.
What does, a $1.4 million sale for one of the first ordinals mean versus something like Peppermint? What do you think?
Well, I think for me, from a collectability standpoint, what you have there is you have a bet on a protocol, right? The guy who bought Ordinal number 2 is saying he thinks he's putting a little bit of his massive wealth, right? This is not somebody who had $2 million and they're betting, almost their full stack. This is a guy with many, many, many times that amount who's saying, I'm going to take a portion of my stack and I'm going to bet on ordinals. And what I'm going to say is I'm going to bet on basically the highest value item I can buy, one purchase of one super high value item, betting on the movement of this entire protocol. And I think it's certainly right now in crypto, it doesn't seem like a bad bet. I mean, ordinals are winning. They're winning big time. They're winning mind share. It's complete crushage out. I mean, it's, I think we're all proud that we're part of it, right? But ordinals are completely crushing, and it's spread not only from Bitcoin, but it's spread to basically every chain on earth now have inscriptions. I think that's super powerful, and it all leads back to the mother chain of Bitcoin. I mean, it's just, the narrative is so strong that it seems like a pretty wise bet. So that said, does Peppermint and the work of Chain have some important historical perspective, and from a niche collectible perspective, is that going to be important? Time will tell. I don't particularly know. I know how fickle kind of collectors are at that level where it is a niche. But certainly Chain is just an awesome dude and such a great player in the space that, I think we all here support him and support his work. And it's great to see somebody win like that. So for me, it's awesome to see that. Go ahead, Dogfather, take us out, man.
Yeah, maybe if we want to interpret the title of the space a bit more in detail. So we know that the figure has a supply of 69 based on the latest sale. This is a bit more than $300,000. So it's not like 40,000 versus 1.4 million. It's not that much of a magnitude of difference. It is still having a decent market cap. and this is still the beginning, right? So we can close this gap if the I mean the current floor is like 10 ETH, right? I don't know whether anyone is buying for that. Maybe somewhere in between, but then we're not that far away from this 1.4 million, taking the whole supply together. So yeah, let's see. I think it's a very solid fake rare card. It's I think the market cap is even higher than Dimitri Cheniak's piece, and I think this is quite a statement, right? So yeah, let's see where this is going in 1 or 2 years, how this is aging. The cool thing is, if you see on X chain, nobody is opening a dispenser. It's really like fully in
Diamond handing, man.
diamond handing. We had a few sales on Emblem Vault with some in the fake rare collection, but on X chain, on the native dispensers, it's zero. I mean,
Yeah.
really zero. Not even some moonshot, not even a Bitcoin. I mean, nobody is listing the permanent. So I'm really looking forward to the price discovery.
Very, very cool. It's the well, look, we're in the midst of that's the current meta, right? Is on chain. Ordinals has led the charge, and Chain positioned himself perfectly with his own artwork. I mean, it's pretty incredible. And so I think a lot of people are like, oh wow, they're diamond handing now because they realize retail hasn't even come in yet. And if this narrative maintains itself for the next, year or so, when we have retail come in, you could easily throw another zero at the end of that. Who knows, right? So awesome times. It's a great time to be in the bull market. This is fun, man. This is when it gets fun. We've been in 18 months of like down bad, and it is really nice to see the timeline happy again. So Chris, go ahead, take us out, man.
Yeah, man, great show. And if you're out in Denver, feel free to enjoy yourself, take the weekend off, and kind of connect. But man, awesome week of shows. We host Tuesday through Thursday, 11:30 a.m. every week. We'll be back with Jake next week. He's out in Denver, so if you see Jake out there, go ahead and say hi. And thanks for everyone for showing up. We had a great week, and take it easy.